Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another open book broadcast. I am your host, Allie, with The Right Place, Right Time. I'm an international book coach and ghostwriter, and also an award-winning author. And once a month, I go live with beautiful guests who are on the publishing path to talk about all the things writing and publishing, and we are open books about it. And today I'm really excited. We're talking about learning to write a book for the very first time. And I have three wonderful guests who are with me who are embarking on this very journey pretty much as we speak. They're all drafting their manuscripts and are all at various phases and stages of those drafts. And they are going to share with us their journeys, their wisdom, their insights, their hard lessons learned along this path, and also the benefits and rewards that they've already received as a result of working on their books. Before I bring them into a full-blown awesome conversation, I want to formally introduce each of them. I'm going to start just in the order of how they
She'll be back. It's fine.
Where'd she go?
Technology.
Well, we can just give her a second and just introduce ourselves with our book. We're just gonna fly with it. You know, Sheila, I'm just gonna kind of jump in here, and why don't you introduce yourself with your amazing intro and your book and what it's about, and we'll give Allie a second to pop back on.
All right. Well, Stephanie, Jennifer, my book is 83,000 word nonfiction memoir titled Ghosts in the Tuco. And at the age of 45, working as a midwife and a nurse practitioner for the Indian Health Service, my life is shattered by the death of my soulmate. As I grapple with my grief, it also unroofs my buried memories of my toxic childhood, plunging me into a sea of strife as I try to seek my own identity. In an effort to outrun my pain, I summit the highest mountain in Africa. I contemplate the unthinkable, and then hastily I join a medical humanitarian mission in Sudan. Now, isolated in a remote African village, I'm stuck with the inability to run, and as the months go on, I realize I've really only added to my problems. My quest for self-discovery unfolds as I navigate the harsh environment, adjust to unfamiliar cultural norms, encounter African wildlife, deliver oodles of babies, and witness the hidden resilience of the community I went to save. My quest, so now I'm faced with a decision to dive into the richness of the Nuer culture, the tribe I went to save, hoping it will guide me to help me uncover my personal truths. Or will I stick to my old routine and escape the pain? That's the synopsis.
It's absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to read this. Jen, why don't you give a little intro and what your book's about?
Well, I am Dr. Jennifer Capler, and I am the DM woman. My husband passed away in the summer of 2021, and it led me on a journey of thinking about who I am, where am I going, what is life without the other half. And so I started writing a memoir, and it turned into transformation through life, love, and death, and is about how my life experiences set me up for the path to healing after the passing of him. And how all those experiences combined helped me to remember who I was at the very core of myself and how to move forward.
So it seems Allie unintentionally invited three people into the circle who have lost their husbands. My name is Stephanie Tudyk, and after many years of dealing with big personalities and dealing with big budgets and dealing with big aspects of life, I found myself widowed at the age of 36, I believe. And my book, I'm actually making a fiction, a novel with a working title called Verses in Freedom. And mine's a bit shifted because it wasn't the best marriage. And so my novel is a braided narrative following two women, Jude and Sarah, and how they find freedom and themselves and living in their authenticity after death. And death bringing about a freedom to expand and take up space and be who they really are. So I'm going a different route where it is somewhat based on my life, but taking more of the fiction route. So very excited about that.
Interesting.
So yeah, I texted Allie, internet kicked her out. So I'm just going to kind of keep going for us here until she's able to get back in. Allie had sent us a couple questions, and I'm just going to kick us off with one, and then we can just keep talking if that's all right with you all.
Perfect.
Beautiful.
Sounds good.
That works.
Awesome. So, Jen, would you kind of let us, talk about how you determined you kind of wanted to write a book?
So I've had a wild life. I am only 48, and I've had so many wild and weird things happen. And half the stuff that has happened to me, people are like, "Ah, that couldn't have possibly. Yeah, you're just making stuff up." I'm like, I wish at the time. And somebody had asked me, "Why don't you put it into a book?" And it's a way to help with the recovery process. I actually started writing the memoir in, I'm going to say, early 22. So, like not even a year after he died. And it was the first draft was very cathartic and very, kind of led a direction of where it was going, to learn how to rediscover myself, really. And Allie actually was a big push in helping me just do it, just write it, like just spit it out there. And that's where it started, and just kind of spiraled from there, and it's expanded a lot since then, especially since I've kind of hit the point where I've mostly recovered. Like grief, you never heal from, there's always the waves that you roll with once in a while. And it just kind of spiraled after finding and discovering who I was at my core and where I wanted to go and be and who I want to be. Actually, I'm still working on that. I haven't grown up yet.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. I kind of feel the same in a sense that I always kind of loved creativity and jotting down ideas. I just never thought I could actually write a book. And without plugging Allie as like the person that's helped me with this, I had a friend that was like, "I know this girl, go talk to her. She'll help you see you can write a book." And I get on a call with Allie and like 10 minutes in, and I was like, "Oh, I actually might be able to do this." And I find myself like halfway through my first draft already, and I'm like, "Oh, cool." I mean, it's got its challenges, but it's like, how many people can say they're writing a book, right? I haven't finished it, but I'm actually writing a book. That's where I'm just kind of like, sometimes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me,
How about you, Sheila?
when I determined, well, sorry, I was just going to say, when I, about writing a book, I journaled for years. I've written everything down. And as I moved around the world, I kind of carried my box of journals with me. And I was living in France for about 15 years. And when I moved back to the US about a year ago, I had all these boxes, and I opened up the boxes, and I started reading them and looking at pictures. And I thought, I think this is the time, it just became a perfect time. And then, of course, to kind of mirror what you both said, 10 minutes of a conversation with Allie, and I knew that she was my gal. I mean, just, yeah. So, yeah.
And Sheila, I think I saw, how far are you on your book?
I'm finished with my draft. I finished, I had Allie just finished my first read through. And so now we're on volume 2, and yeah, and now I have to spend the next month, you know, kind of adjusting that, and then we'll have our next read through, and then we'll go from there. Yeah.
Beautiful.
How about both of you? Where are you, Stephanie and Jennifer, in your process?
You know, I'm halfway through my first draft, and you know, one of the biggest challenges I've had with all of this is my arbitrary deadline that I've put on myself, and it taking me longer than I wanted to, and Allie having to consistently remind me, because I'm in the full-time corporate finance world. I juggle massive other life stuff, and she's just like, stop beating yourself up. This is your book. It will come when it will come. So I'm halfway through the first draft. Not quite on the deadline I wanted, but you know what? It's getting there.
Yeah, so. It's a big marathon. It really is, isn't it?
Yeah. So
how about you, Jennifer? Where are you in the process?
Process. It is still with the editor, and she's about halfway through it, I think, and just kind of working through the first draft, first round edit, because this is not my first draft.
Good.
Beautiful. So we have 3 stages here of completion.
Yeah.
Jennifer seems a little bit farther along than the rest of us. Beautiful. I love it. So what about visions of the book? I mean, in terms of what do you hope people will get or see or feel or hear when they read your story? Whomever.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, my hope is that people can understand that, you know, grief is not a singular concept. It's a broad spectrum. And my goal is to help people understand that, you know, you heal in the time it takes you to heal from grief. It is not like an injury. It's not like a broken leg. You know, there's no set definitions, and screw society, because I mean, you know, people are like, well, why don't you get out there and date, or you should never date again. I mean, they're all over of course, you know, dating is another freaking,
haven't we heard all of that advice?
Nice. Right? And my goal is to help other people, and maybe not just women, because there's plenty of men that experience this, understand that it's okay. It's okay to go through the stage of rediscovery, to redefine who you are and where you want your life to go, that there's no age concept when it comes to setting a new course.
Yeah.
Yes. So, you know, listening to the two of you talk, and for me, whenever I talk about my story, I get so many people that just feel like it's a breath of light of me being able to speak some things that others are too afraid to speak, and to say the things that go against societal norms. And I also do life coaching, and I help people with grief. And you're absolutely right that your story is completely what it needs to be. And I hope that by talking about my story and talking about, because it is one of those things that from the outside, it's like in both Jude and Sarah's stories, you have a great relationship, you have a great husband, you've got this house, and you've got the kids, and you've got all the things, and then understanding what's actually going on with people in their story maybe isn't, and maybe it's helping people be okay and not feel guilty about saying whatever their truth is. That would light me up if people can actually be who they need to be and be their authentic selves. And I hope that my story gives people the bravery to do that, you know? And Allie's back. You're on mute, man.
Yeah, you're muted.
I'll just finish with I'll finish with the question of we were talking about the vision for the book. We're just doing our own interview, Allie. I mean, we're just kind of
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
So the vision for my book, I think for me personally, is I really wanted to learn about the art of writing. And, you know, I published in medical journals, but obviously that's much different than a memoir. And I think I really wanted to put together the pieces of my past. So that was kind of my personal vision. But for the reader, I guess I really wanted to take them on this bumpy ride, you know, from conquering a mountain peak to a sojourn in Morocco to embarking on a 2-year medical mission in Sudan, and really talk about these bloodhound qualities of grief. I mean, how it will just track you to the end of the earth. I think the other thing is I really wanted to capture the soul and spirit of the Nuer people, the tribe that I worked with, and to really illustrate kind of the commonality of human experiences of grief and life and hardship. And then finally, I really wanted to depict the universal yearning of all humanity, kind of our life purposes, highlighting that all of us, we can really achieve. I guess seeing these individuals achieve a purpose to life with unbelievable obstacles and with limited resources really makes you kind of stand back, look at yourself and your truth, your own personal truths.
I'm loving how we all, and Allie, you said it before we started, you didn't do this on purpose, but there's definitely intertwining themes of all three of us in different, vastly different ways though, and yet beautifully the same. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to, you know, something that first-time authors, and you might have all been here yourselves, you'll have to think back like where you were before the journey, but a lot of first-time authors, they doubt that there's anything unique about their experience or there's anything unique to offer to the conversation because everybody has experienced X, right? In the case of this particular conversation, right, you have all experienced a very particular kind of loss. Yet each one of your books is very different. Each one of your stories is very different. Each way that you are going to talk about what you went through is very different. How you related to the grief and the loss is different, right? And so, yes, there's like the big overarching kind of umbrella theme or whatever, but every single one of you, your story has a place and is going to impact somebody differently than the other, right? And this is like what I want like aspiring authors to know the most from my perspective as like a coach and as a developmental editor and as a ghostwriter is like, don't decide for the people that your story doesn't matter or that it's not worth writing or being told. Write it and let them decide, right? Like if there's thousands of books, you know, more than thousands published every single year, then that suggests that like there's enough space for the market to hold a variety of these stories and for them to get to the millions of people, you know, that are out there as readers. So I love that there's this overlap between the three of you, but yet your stories and your projects couldn't be more different because you're all so different. And I'm sorry I missed how whatever gold nugget you already dropped, the internet literally died as I was about to introduce you. Like the router went black and I was like, oh, what just happened? It's not my router, it's the building's router, but it's in my office. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. Number one, so I don't miss the rest of this conversation, but two, so people don't start banging on this door thinking that I've wiped out the internet for every other person in this building. Thankfully, I only live around the corner, but all right. So you talked about your book. I'm guessing you talked about the where I came in on was what you want your reader to get out of it.
Yes.
Did you talk about where you're at in the writing process?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What about one thing you've learned in working on your book? Okay. So let's go there. Like people who are watching this either live or the replay, right? We're hoping that there are people who are thinking about writing a book but haven't taken the leap yet. What's one thing that stands out that you've now learned about working on a book that maybe you didn't know before?
Oh, now we're all quiet. I guess for me, it's really the aspect of there's so much you know, I used to think if I really wanted to write a book, I'm just going to sit down and start writing. And the first 6 months, I didn't put pen to paper in terms of writing a sentence. It was all of the character development and outlining. And then after you write the draft, it's all the things like, I didn't know there's a people out there that do typesetting for a living. Like all of this stuff, I'm going to go stuff, right? That goes into, and so this isn't a plug for you, Allie. It's just, it's been monumental having you as my coach and having a coach just, or somebody in your life that has knows, because I would be so lost. So for me, one thing I've learned that's not just about writing, but just in general of writing a book specifically, is all the things that go into it. Now I see where there's a whole industry of people making money writing books because there's so much. And if I didn't have your help and support, I probably would get overwhelmed with it all. So I'm able to just focus on the creativity aspect for a bit, and that's good. But that's been a whole world opened up to me.
Yeah. No, that's a good one.
Yeah, what Stephanie said, because like all the things, right? All on end when you because then you've got, of course, now they're mowing. So then marketing, you've got social media, you've got things, I mean, you're still marketing after the fact, you know. There's so much to it that it's understandable why it's a complex, you know.
I would mirror what both of you said, especially about Allie. You know, all of the benefits of working with her. But I think the other thing that I learned is that I felt like when I started the memoir, it's like when you start a puzzle. I had the corner pieces of the puzzle and the border, but I really didn't have the middle. And I think by writing the memoir, I really felt like I was now able to finish that and look at the quirky reasons why I did what I did, and really understanding that. So
yeah, writing a book, especially when you're in either the memoir space or you're writing a book like Stephanie is, that's based on true life events, right? Like you learn not just about the writing, but you learn about yourself, like in hindsight, like retrospect, right? Like, well, why did I do that? And how would I explain that to a reader about why I thought that or reacted that way, and having to really connect the dots for them in ways that you haven't been asked to before, like, except for maybe in therapy, right? Our therapists might want us to connect the dots. But typically, like without it being our inner circle, our closest friends, right? When we're telling somebody a story about our lives, we're telling them kind of the front running headlines, the stuff that's easy to grab at the top, but we're not necessarily then like leaning back and going, and that's why I connected it back to the thing that happened in childhood when I was 8. And so, right, like, but when you're writing a book and you're crafting a story, backstory is just as important as front story, right? But then also, you know, as Sheila and I have talked about, the interiority and the emotionality is also important, right? So interiority meaning, what are you thinking and feeling in that moment? And emotionality meaning, how are you reacting to something that has happened? Like, what's the emotional reaction that takes shape in the way that you say something in response or the way that you do something in response? Those things are all a part of character development on the page, regardless of genre. You know, when you're telling a narrative story and it's following a particular person, all of those pieces, right, come into play. And when you then are the main character, right, you can't make that shit up necessarily. Like, it's got to be based in truth, right? So then you got to look at yourself in a whole different way, because you have to come alive on the page in that 3D way that makes you dynamic and also complicated and messy and nuanced and imperfect, because that's what people are expecting, because people know that people aren't wholly good and wholly perfect. So yeah, writing is like, it just breaks open. It breaks open a lot of things on a lot of levels. Like there's like the industry piece of it, which is like, who knew that there were typesetters and cover designers and book doctors and editors, and, you know, the list runs on, right? And then there's the, like, who knew how deep I would get within myself to like birth this work and this story. What's one thing that's been challenging in the process?
What did you cut out, Allie? What was your question? What was one thing what?
That's been challenging about writing a book?
Imposter syndrome.
Finding an ending.
Okay, imposter syndrome, finding an ending.
Imposter syndrome, yeah.
Yeah, these are good. Okay, let's go with finding an ending first, and then we'll back up into imposter syndrome. So tell me more about finding an ending.
When I started it, I was nowhere near at a space where I should have been trying to write about grief and healing, because I wasn't even close to being at the healing stage, you know. I was still thick in it up until probably like December of this past year, or last year. And it wasn't until that point that oh shit, I know how to finish this book. Like, okay, I get it, you know. I had a health crisis and it sucker punched me, and I went, oh, I need to shit or get off the pot. Like, this is it. And then I found my ending.
Okay. I like what you said though about timing, right? Like you were still in it, so you weren't really in a position to write about it, right? And I think with memoir, that's a really important piece, is people understanding their own timing. Everybody goes through their experiences differently, and everybody heals from those experiences at different paces. And I use heals in quotation marks because some things are not like a final destination of like, and now I am healed, the end. And grief is definitely one of those things, right? Where there's not like a final destination. Like that stuff can come up for years and years and years after. And you can process it differently years later, and maybe it's not as triggering, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But I think that when it comes to writing memoir, you have to have whatever is a healthy enough distance for you to be able to write objectively about your experience. And that doesn't mean that you won't still get emotionally triggered. It doesn't mean that, you know, you might not end up in waterworks, right? Like remembering something really hard and painful. But like, there has to be the ability for you to be able to see through the fog, right? And if you're still in the fog, it's going to make it really difficult to write a memoir. And that's not just memoirs about grief and loss. That's memoirs about trauma, divorce, illness. I mean, just whatever it is. Notice how I didn't say anything happy and sunshiny, okay? Because memoirs ain't about that. So you have to be in that place where you can kind of see the forest and the trees, right? Because you're giving both perspectives in memoir, and sometimes you just can't do that if you're not through the thick of it yet. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Now, Sheila, you mentioned imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we talked, or I said to Allie a text in the middle of the night, and I thought, what am I doing? This is crazy. No one will read this story. And yeah, just so that, and, you know, she kept saying, you know, you've got this, you know, it's a universal theme, but your story's different. So keep going and, you know, be brave, continue on. So yeah. And I can't say that I'm not over that. I mean, I think I still continue with that as I, you know, move forward and wonder how the rest of the editing will go and where my next steps will be. I think, you know, but it's vulnerability when you do something new, right? It's that. It's like anything we've ever done, anything I've ever done. And you always have that piece of vulnerability until you can check a box and say, yes, I wrote a book.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the imposter syndrome probably never really goes away entirely. It's just, again, it's like how you respond to it, just like you do with like grief and loss. You know, like I still, like when I get a new review on my memoir that was published in 2020, I'm like, they're gonna find me out and they're gonna realize it's not a good book. You know, like even though they're like 4 and 5 star reviews for however many reviews I have at this point on Amazon for that book, you know, they've all been like overwhelmingly positive. I've got 1 neutral 3-star, you know, and yet every time there's a new review posted, I'm like, no, this is gonna be the moment. So I don't know that it ever completely disappears. I think you just like your response time or your reactionary time is like different. Like you're like, and you're like, oh no, I'm fine. Like I'm okay. But I don't think you're alone in that, Sheila. I think anybody who writes a book for the first time has that imposter syndrome. And honestly, it comes back when you write your second book. Because now you're like, oh, these are brand new ideas that I'm putting out into the world. Maybe those ones will suck. Like it's that inner critic that's just a real jerk.
Yeah.
And I think for me, Sheila, you talked about vulnerability, and I think my biggest challenge, and even talking about it now and being on this live stream and realizing some of the things I've said, yes, this is a fiction. Yes, this is partly based on my life. And there are things in this book that, no, it's not this. I am not writing a memoir. And yet I am pulling from things in my life that people that are alive are not going to be okay with me talking about. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I am still, my body is actually reacting right now when I think about it. I am still dealing with the thought of other people's opinions about what I'm writing and what I'm sharing. And then I keep reminding myself that this is my story, and it's a story that resonates with a lot of people. And that if me being brave to get my story out helps somebody else make the decision to leave the marriage or makes the decision to speak out their truth, then that's worth it for me. So I can really resonate with the vulnerability, and it is an aspect of grief as well, of dealing with guilt and various other things of, well, you should feel this way about your dead husband. And I'm like, no, well, I don't. So, it's a lot of,
yeah. I love that you're bringing that up, because I think, again, like, this goes back to what we can offer to the conversation, right? We have lots of conversations about grief and loss in the way that it's expected, right? Culturally expected to grieve and lose people that we are attached to in whatever way. But we don't have a lot of perspectives or narratives that we talk about where it's like, I'm free now. Thank God. Right? I have another chance. And it doesn't make that narrative, because it's not the typical narrative that we hear, less important. It's probably actually more important, because it's not being talked about enough. So then there's people who are suffering in silence, who have the same feelings, right? Who aren't getting thrown a bone, because culturally we have very specific ideas, and actually, Sheila, your book deals with grief on a couple of different levels, while the front running level, right, is your loss of your soulmate and your husband, Rick. You're really grappling with grief and loss the whole time, every time one of those babies that you deliver doesn't make it.
Yeah.
Right. And watching how the New Era tribe responds to that, and the way how different their response to the loss is compared to, let's say, Western culture or whatever. And so, I think your book kind of touches on two different things, really, which is like kind of the expected way that we think that people will grieve a loss, but then how other cultures look at loss differently.
And like I said, at the end of, really at the end theme, the end question of maybe will be on my book cover is, and in the end, who ends up saving who? I mean, that's really the question. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also like that Sheila, you touch on all the things that people say to try to make you feel better.
Oh.
And these are so, like, this came up in a prior client's book, Life After Kevin by Susan Lynch. All the things that people said to her after her son had passed away from an accidental overdose that were meant to be comforting, but were just like landing poorly and not comforting whatsoever. If anything, like the exact opposite. And Sheila, you touch on some of those too, like the people in your life who say things like, the sun will come out tomorrow, you can always marry again, thank God you didn't have children. You think about those things and you're like, why would anybody say shit like that?
Read a book, take a vacation, go back to school, move, don't move, stay. And really, I think they're genuinely trying to help, but I think the culture doesn't know. The culture, it's uncomfortable and people don't know what to say. So I think they're doing the best that they can, but it doesn't feel when on the receiving end very very comfortable at that time. I mean, a good lesson for moving forward, right?
A good lesson for all of us of things not to do. I think, when it comes to grief and loss, best to just say, I'm sorry, I'm here for you. Call me anytime, I can help. Like whatever it is you need, laundry, food, going fisticuffs with the other people who are saying really insensitive bullshit. Whatever it is that you need. I digress. Let's wrap up with one last question and then we'll talk about where people can connect with you. What's a piece of advice that you would give someone who's just getting started and has never done this before?
I think for me, it's what you told me that I have on a sticky note, kind of posted in just places, and it's just right. I think it's don't overthink it. What's analysis paralysis? Just write to get something on the page, and then the likes of editors and people and whatever can help you with the nuances and the flow, but just get it on the page. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, you can't shape what's not there.
Mm-hmm.
I would say first buy a great espresso machine and kilos of coffee beans. Number one. The second thing is some duct tape to strap yourself in the chair. I mean, you really need to strap yourself in the chair. I mean, I had to. And yeah, I think it's that. The other thing that hire a professional, of course. I mean, hiring Allie was the best thing that, I mean, I don't know the art of writing. I can deliver a baby in the African bush, but can I write a sentence without passive voice? Not really, not very, yes. I mean, I do write it with passive voice. That's my problem. So, hiring a professional, I think is really important. And the other thing that Allie taught me is about taking my ideas for a walk. And I'm a big walker, hiker, anything outside. And I would always take one question with me on my daily run and really just kind of talk to myself in the desert and ask myself out loud, what about this? Why? Dig deeper. And that's, that's been really good advice for me personally.
And give yourself grace.
Yeah,
such a big one. In what instances, Jen, in what instances do you think grace is really important along the way?
Patience, be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself. Like it's a process. When you're writing for the first time, it is a process, especially if you're writing about something traumatic. You're going to have to feel the feels, and you're going to have to confront some ugly truths. And like in mine, had to confront the fact that my husband was a great husband and he was a terrible.
Oh no.
So,
wait a minute, Jen, you cut out at this really hilarious moment. You were like, my husband was a great husband, but he was a really terrible, and then
he was a terrible father.
Oh. All right.
I mean, there's a couple of things he could have worked on in that department, but we crack jokes about it a lot. But yeah, so you have to understand and give yourself grace to confront these truths, because life is not all happy joy. There's a lot of things that you have to confront. So give yourself grace and be kind to yourself with the whole process of healing and dealing with the shit.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. So grace, duct tape, coffee, just right, and take your ideas for a walk. I mean, there you go. There's your toolkit, folks. You heard it from these three wonderful women. All right, so Stephanie, where should people connect with you? And do you have anything coming up that you want to let them know about, or any kind of freebie or anything?
Really, my Instagram and my LinkedIn is where I live the most. LinkedIn's a little more professional, as you know, with the business And if anybody's looking for any kind of life coaching aspects, but Instagram is then where I'm more me. So if you just want some good, bright, breathing, light energy, come check me out over there.
Awesome. She does post some really fabulous stuff. So, and I hope the three of you will connect after this as well. Jen, where can people connect with you?
Well, for the more professional side, I recommend LinkedIn because, let's face it, my Facebook is a shit show of humor. I have no rhyme or rhythm on Facebook. It's just fun to me. I'm from, the Gen X school of, hey, this shit's funny. Let's post it. Who knows what it's going to be tomorrow, right? Like, it could be serious. It could be happy. Who knows?
I love it. I love it because it's wholly authentically you and all your neuro spiciness, as you
For sure.
Sheila.
For me, it's Facebook with my full name. I don't post much at all. I'm forcing myself to form a platform. I'm trying. So I have Facebook and I have LinkedIn, and I'm waiting to move forward in the process. I don't have anything coming up at this time. I did join a local writers group in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So I'm anxious for that. And I've reached out to the library who features authors. So I'm hoping to participate in that, and a local NPR station. I've connected with a life coach who has asked me when we move forward to be on the show. So more to come on that.
Awesome. I love it. And folks who are paying attention to this broadcast, right? This is all about platform building. Where you show up, where you play, the messages you put out there, the people that follow you, the people you connect with, in whatever way that is, whether it's social, whether it's radio interviews, whether it's getting out there in your local group and making people aware of you and your writing. Like, this is all the stuff that aspiring authors are made of, because unfortunately it's not just about writing your book. It's also about building the audience and following who are going to buy your book when the book comes out. So on that final little nugget of wisdom, we're going to wrap up today's open book broadcast. We have another one coming up September 10th. And that one's going to be a little bit more loosely just pursuing the passion of writing, kind of generally speaking, because you don't have to write a book in order to be a writer. You don't need to write a book in order to pursue writing for fun, pleasure, creativity, outlet, escape, therapy, whatever it is. So we're coming with that conversation next month at 10:15 Eastern time with more fabulous guests. I just cannot get over how many amazing people I've had a chance to talk with this year for Open Book Broadcast. So please connect with these wonderful, wonderful women wherever they are hanging out. Stephanie, Sheila, and Jen, thank you so much for being here with me this morning and stealing the show while my internet went down. I love that I could walk away, not purposely, and you were just like, you took the bull by the horns and you kept going. So thank you so much. Best of luck with each one of your projects. I'm obviously here rooting for you, promoting all the things. You got a friend for life in me when it comes to these projects. So keep doing what you're doing, stay the course, and you'll be changing the world as soon as that book's out and available. All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for being here with us. Ciao.
Thanks. Bye.